Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's Planning and Development Committee meeting, today being Monday the 21st of August 2017. With reference to the recording and webcasting of the meeting, this committee meeting is being webcast and recorded. By speaking at the committee meeting, you agree to being recorded and webcast. Please ensure that if and when you are speaking at this committee meeting, that you are respectful to the other people and use appropriate language. AlburyCity accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures made during the course of this committee meeting. An audio recording will be made for administrative purposes. Can I ask the General Manager to confirm that we've not received any conflict of interest declarations?
None received, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I'll ask the General Manager to read the disclosure pertaining to political donations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This advice to the Planning and Development Committee relates to the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979. Section 147 requires a person submitting planning applications or submissions regarding a planning application to disclose any reportable political donation and or gifts to any local councillor or employee of council. Reportable political donations include those of or above $1,000. The disclosure statement forms are available on Council's website or from the Customer Service Centre and must be lodged in accordance with the Act. The forms are also available at the back of the chamber during meetings. In dealing with development applications, councillors need to take into account specific matters contained in the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979. Accordingly, the provisions of 79C1 of that Act are set out in the Council Officer's report detailing issues to be considered. The Local Government Act 1993, Section 375A requires that a division be called whenever a motion for a planning decision is put at a meeting of the Council or a Council committee. Planning decisions means a decision made in the exercise of a function of Council under the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act, including a decision relating to a development application, an environmental planning instrument, a development control plan or a development contribution plan under that Act, but not including the making of an order under Division 2A of Part 6 of that Act. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We'll move now to apologies. I believe all members of the committee are present here this evening, so we have no apologies. We're moving now to the confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting. That meeting was held the 10th of July. Councillor Mack.
Madam Chair, happy to move that committee recommends to Council that the minutes of the Planning and Development Committee meeting held on Monday the 10th of July 2017 at 6 p.m. be adopted. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Madam Chair.
Thank you. There's no indication of any questions pertaining to the minutes, so I'll put those minutes to the committee. All those in favour? Anyone against? That motion is carried. Matters arising from the minutes? There's no indication of any matters arising or councillors wishing to raise matters from those minutes. So we'll move on to the reports, minutes of committee and working parties. There are none. So we'll move on to item 7, officers' report for consideration. We have 3. The first being the draft parking patrol and enforcement policy and procedure. 7.1, Councillor Stutchbury.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to move that this committee endorses this policy and procedure and recommends to Council that they approve for public exhibition. Would you like me to read out the attachments?
No, that will be fine. Thank you
Good.
very much. Councillor Doxey to second.
Happy to second, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury, did you wish to open debate? There's no one wishing to, or there's no indication of anyone wishing to speak against or indeed any questions at this stage.
Well, I had a quick look at the report and it seems pretty reasonable to me, so I don't think there's much to say.
Thank you. That being noted, I'll put that motion to the committee that we endorse the policy and procedures and recommend to Council that they be approved for public exhibition. All those in favour? Anyone against? That motion is carried. We're now moving to item 7.2, the draft economic development policy. Councillor Conn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the Planning and Development Committee recommend to Council that Council A, receive and note the submissions received in response to the public exhibition of the draft Economic Development Policy, and B, adopt the draft Economic Development Policy excluding the Economic Development Incentive Program elements.
Okay, so we'll just get that wording up there. Added to, I believe that's to B, excluding.
Yes, that's option 2 from the report.
Excluding the Economic Development Incentive Program elements. Is that correct? It's, as you said, item 2.
The wording is for option 2.
Okay,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay. As on the screen.
Program elements. Thank you. Councillor Conn has just confirmed that she's happy with that wording. So looking for a seconder for Councillor Conn there, noting the motion is slightly different from the recommendation in the paperwork. Councillor Stutchbury.
I'm happy to second that, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Now, there's no one, yes, there is someone wishing to speak against. There's no questions at this stage, so I'll go back to Councillor Conn to ask Councillor Conn if she'd like to open debate.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I will speak briefly to this. I've always had some reservations about the draft Economic Development Incentives Program, and at our last meeting I voted in favour of putting the draft out for public comment. Now that we've received 3 detailed submissions from residents, admittedly only 3, but none of them in favour of the policy, I feel obliged to speak to those submissions. So we've done 2 rounds of community consultation. The first round of Have a Say, we had only 44% support from the community for direct incentives to businesses, which is what this policy is proposing. So we've got minority support from the community, and I'm hoping that we are a council that actually makes changes to our policies based on feedback, and that we're not just ticking a box by putting these things out on community consultation. I have ongoing concerns that this policy could inadvertently hinder existing businesses. Council's not in a position to be picking winners by giving direct cash handouts to new and expanding businesses. And we should be standing by the businesses who committed to Albury without having that sort of a handout. At $300,000 a year, I just can't support this. We all hear about residents' various priorities every day, whether that's building a new swimming pool or repairing roads and footpaths or cultural activities. I've never had a single resident approach me to support a spend of $1.2 million on direct cash handouts to businesses in Albury. I support the other initiatives that council has shown in terms of attracting investment and trying to promote jobs growth, but I don't support direct financial support of businesses. I don't believe the community does either, and that's why I've excluded that aspect of the policy.
Thank you, Councillor Conn. We have a couple of speakers against. There's still no questions indicated. Councillor Van der Ven is the first speaker against, then Councillor Mack. Councillor Van der Ven.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I speak against this only about Section B, and I would foreshadow an alternative motion in the event that this one failed to get up, which I hope it does. We did need an economic development policy, and for Councillor Conn to be making her statements in response to 3 submissions, from my perspective, that discounts the 22,000 silent majority of ratepayers who probably have had a chance to have a look at this and decided that was probably all okay. The issue for me is around the fact that if we want to be in a competitive space as far as the sorts of incentives that were outlined as being appropriate under this policy, then I think we need to be putting that $300,000 towards it. If the issues around the money can be used, better in any other part of our council, then I argue that the council's in a pretty good financial position to be able to afford to do this if the money is required, and that's not even a given at this stage. That the money is there in case we have a situation which is a competitive environment and which to try and attract business and offset some of those costs that businesses have in establishing themselves here. Now, through the years, there's always been all sorts of incentives available. I know that when I first came to Albury 31 years ago, there was some very good incentives from the Development Corporation in the way of low-cost housing incentives to come to Albury to start a business. So I'm cognizant of the fact that probably a lot of people, might have taken advantage of that in those days. I know I did for a period of about 18 months before I bought my own property, my own flat. And so from my perspective, those sorts of little things were the difference between starting a business in Albury and not starting a business in Albury. So from my perspective, I think that we do need to have the option to have this money available. And I would ask my fellow councillors to think very hard about this. It's great to have an economic development policy, but without the funding, should it be required to back it up, I think it's we're basically back to square one. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Van der Ven. We've had someone indicate they wish to ask a question, so I'll move to the question and break in the speakers for and against. So, Councillor Thurley, to ask your question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's probably to Ms Squire. I note there were 3 submissions. Were there any other submissions received, for example, on the Chamber of Commerce or any other business group?
Mr Zackney, thank you. Ms Squire?
Through you, Madam Chair. No, Councillor Thurley, there were not.
Councillor Thurley, you happy? All right. Whilst we don't have another speaker for, as chair, I'm going to exercise my right to allow Councillor Mack to speak against. However, Councillor Cameron, whilst he's not a member of the committee, is welcome to the table and would like to ask a question. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to ask, through you, to the appropriate member of staff, how much ratepayers' money do we already give to the business community of Albury through assistance to the Chamber of Commerce and other grants and gifts?
Ms Squire.
Thank you. Ms Squire?
Through you, Madam Chair, we provide direct financial assistance to the Albury Northside Chamber of Commerce in the order of around $150,000 a year. We also facilitate and collect on their behalf the promotional special rate levy, and we pay that to the Albury Northside Chamber of Commerce as well, now that it encapsulates Albury Central. In terms of broader direct financial assistance, it is not something that council is generally in the habit of doing. It depends how you classify assistance, whether it's direct or indirect. Certainly a lot of the other assistance that's outlined in the economic development policy, whether it's through facilitation support or shared benefit, i.e. streetscape improvements or those sorts of infrastructure projects that we undertake that may provide indirect benefit to business and industry. And then obviously there's the whole raft of other economic development projects that council might undertake.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron, you had a follow-up question, did you?
I'm not sure if I missed it, but was there an approximate figure available of how much we contribute?
I believe there was a figure given early on, but I'll... Ms Squire.
Through you, Madam Chair. So the direct financial assistance to the Albury Northside Chamber is $134,325, and the promotional special rate levy is $150,500.
Which I believe is collected on behalf of that.
That's collected on behalf of Albury Central / Albury Northside Chamber of Commerce.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Van der Ven, you have a question.
Just on the basis of the answer provided to Councillor Cameron's question. So would you be able to enunciate, through you, Madam Chair, what benefits council get in the spending of the $135,000 with the the chamber? What benefits are aligned with what they provide to council and to the community with that money?
Ms Squire?
Through you, Madam Chair, I guess in the broadest possible terms, the key purpose of Council's support for the Albury Northside Chamber is to deliver business development support to the business community. So it really provides assistance for them to work together to support their growth and development, build their skills internally, and I guess provide business-to-business support that in many other areas, councils actually provide that service as part of their economic development function, but that's not something that we do here at AlburyCity.
Yes, certainly. Councillor Van der Ven to follow up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just as a follow-up then, would you be able to put a figure on what the services that are provided by the Albury Northside Chamber to the business community, what that would cost council to replace or to provide that service should Albury Northside not be able to provide that service? Are you able to put a figure on what that might cost council? Thank you.
Ms Squire?
Through you, Madam Chair, it would be difficult to put a figure on it right here, right now. Certainly in previous reports that have been presented to council in relation to its support of the Albury Northside Chamber of Commerce, I recall it's been fairly clearly articulated that if council were to be providing those services in-house to the business community, that we would not be able to do so as efficiently as we do via the Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you. Councillor Mack, whilst you are indeed the next speaker lined up to speak against, would I be able to indulge with a couple of questions? Thank you. Through the General Manager to the most relevant member of staff, Councillor Conn raised a couple of issues that I would just like clarification on, if I may, please. One is that Councillor Conn, I believe, used wording very similar to that such a policy for providing economic development incentives would hinder existing businesses. My understanding is that existing businesses would be eligible to apply for such funding should it be available. Can I seek clarification on that, please? Ms Squire?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, that's correct. There is no discrimination whatsoever between an existing expanding business, noting that the program incentive would only be available for businesses that are looking to create significant new jobs or make significant capital investment, but the policy applies both to existing business and to new businesses coming to town.
Thank you. And if I may as well, through the General Manager to the most relevant member of staff, another point of clarification. I believe Councillor Conn used a figure of 1.2 million to be handed out to businesses. My understanding is that that's over a 4-year term and it's 300,000 maximum per year, and it would be up to, but not necessarily completely utilised. Ms Squire.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, that's correct. So the allocation of $300,000 per annum has been included in the adopted 4-year delivery program, subject to Council's consideration in relation to a policy. In terms of the distribution, if you like, of that money, the fact that Council has allocated $300,000 does not in any way determine that it may spend all that money. Any of the program funding will be provided on merits-based and, as councillors are aware, will be determined by Council following presentation of a comprehensive business case. So certainly there is up to $300,000 available for Council to distribute at its discretion. However, that's certainly not to say that we will receive projects or proposals of enough significance to warrant Council actually authorising program support.
Thank you very much for that. There's no indication of any further questions. Councillor Mack, thank you very much for being so patient.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm speaking against this particular motion on the basis that in my capacity as Mayor in the last few years, We've had many discussions with businesses and potential suitors who wanted to move to Albury, and our issue at the time was a lack of incentive. The government of the day, and this is not to reflect on the local member, but the government of the day does not and will not provide adequate incentives for us to offer anything to businesses unless, of course, you make application, and sometimes that can take months, and by the time the application gets through, like Exlam, it's moved to another state. Not to say that it's in the region and it still employs Albury people. My issue with this particular proposition that has been put forward in this particular recommendation as it sits, B, as Councillor Van der Ven did indicate, is exactly what Ms Squire just said. The policy states quite clearly that the $300,000 is allocated and doesn't mean it's going to be spent. There are contingent guidelines that are in here that do not include handouts to businesses. And as previously mentioned, the questions meted out my other debating point about other businesses in Albury do already receive assistance through the Chamber and other forums that we fund. And they are also eligible to receive funds under this incentive scheme if they fit the criteria. And ultimately, yet again, it was reiterated by staff that we make the final decision about that money. Now, if we can't have a level of incentive available to us as a council to encourage businesses to consider laying their roots in Albury, then we become anti-competitive. We are not competing with the prevailing landscape that's out there. Any business that comes to Albury, even though a rate rebate or a developer contribution is not on offer, if it is, it could be the deal breaker. As simple as that. And I really think, and I encourage the councillors here tonight to speak against this policy, because I believe, I agree with Councillor Van der Ven, we need to foreshadow point B as another motion or amendment, because I believe the original motion is the motion we should be supporting, the original recommendation. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you, councillors. I'll now move to Councillor Conn to close debate on her motion as is on the board. Thank you, Councillor Conn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There have been a number of arguments made about the fact that the money's only been allocated and not spent, but it easily could be allocated to any number of other projects that Council's undertaking. Let's not be mistaken, this is a handout to businesses. Part of the criteria in the detail of the program is that the business has to be financially viable without the incentive to be able to receive the incentive. So what we're proposing to do is to prop up the profit margin of a business with ratepayers' money. I don't believe that there's a silent majority here. The community engagement that was undertaken involved posting the policy on the news from AlburyCity. There was a public notice in the Border Mail. There was a direct email to Albury's top 100 major employers. There was an announcement on our Have a Say webpage. It was advertised through the Chamber of Commerce's media and membership communication channels and on council social media. The fact that doing all of that engagement, we have received not one submission in favour of doing this shows me that we simply don't have the support of the community to spend this kind of money. Council does support investment and jobs growth in other ways. We've just had a prolonged discussion about our funding to the Northside Chamber of Commerce, which we're not debating today. We do support the business community, we support investment and we support jobs, but we shouldn't be doing it with handouts, and I support the motion as it stands. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Conn. Having closed debate, I'll now put this motion as a recommendation to the committee. It is similar to the motion in our reading with the slight adaptation at the end of item B. All those in favour? Anyone against? That motion is lost. Councillor Van der Ven.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll move the alternate motion, and that is on page
20.
20. Thank you. Just flick to it. A, receive and note the submissions received in response to the public exhibition of the draft economic development policy, and B, adopt the draft economic development policy.
Thank you. We'll just get that up on the screen. Councillor Doxey, you're next to second that.
Happy to second, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Yes, and we have it up there on the board. Councillor Van der Ven.
Look, I don't think we need to have a further debate on this. We can have point and counterpoint, but I think the majority of our councillors support this particular motion. I think that's a great thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor van der Ven. I'll put this motion, which was the foreshadowed, which is now the motion, to the committee. All those in favour? Anyone against? That motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. We're now moving on to item 7.3, which is the Murray River Experience Draft Riverside Precinct and Parks Public Infrastructure Concepts.
Madam Chair, can I request that the previous vote be recorded?
Certainly. Have a say outcomes. Councillor Conn, you wish to request that I believe you wish to request that the decision for the last recommendation be recorded.
In the minutes.
Thank you. Mr General Manager, would you please record that Councillor Conn voted against, all other councillors voted for? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Conn. Did you have a question? No. So you're happy with that? Thank you very much. So, going back to the Murray River Experience Draft Riverside Precinct and Public Parks, Councillor Mack?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I recommend that Council A, receive and note community feedback in relation to the Murray River Experience Draft Riverside Precinct and Parks Public Infrastructure Concept Plans. B, prepare an application to the Regional Growth Environment and Tourism Program to seek funding to enable implementation of the Murray River Experience projects. And C, allocate funding of $255,000 at the September quarterly budget review to enable detailed design, costing and preparation of applications for required approvals for the Riverside Precinct to be progressed as a priority. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mack. Moving to a seconder, Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll second the motion.
Thank you. We have a question. Councillor Mack, are you happy if we take the question from Councillor Conn before you open debate?
No problem.
Thank you. Councillor Conn, your question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Unlike the previous item, we had hundreds of submissions related to the Murray River Experience Master Plan. My question is through to the relevant member of staff, please. If we proceed with the recommendation tonight to proceed with a grant application, what scope is there for amendments to be made to the current plans?
Ms Squire?
Through you, Madam Chair. The application will still be, I guess it will cover the broader project as presented, as per the concepts that have been exhibited. As is highlighted in the report, we still do need to do detailed designs, and it will be part of the overall project as we move forward. So as we move into that phase, there may be some minor amendments that are required as we work through that process. So certainly there is a possibility. But I wouldn't anticipate that they would be significant given the research and the background work we've done to establish that the concept plans are in fact achievable, and the significant positive feedback that we have received from the community, albeit, as is outlined in the report, there's some great feedback there that what we will do is provide all of the feedback from the community, subject to Council's endorsement of the recommendation, to the design service providers to make sure that that feedback can be taken into account as we work through the next phase.
Thank you. Councillor Conn, you happy with that? Thank you. Councillor Mack, as the mover of that recommendation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'd just like to reiterate what Councillor Conn said. There were 562 submissions on this particular proposition to have your say, and 533 of them strongly supported this particular proposition. Value add with that we received notification from the Regional Growth Environment Tourism Program last week that we have been accepted and shortlisted to put in an application, which to me, after chatting with the people at the workshop the other night, it would appear that it's a coup for Albury to be able to have this opportunity, and I would hope that this would appear to be in the right space to be funded, because it is a good body of work that, again, for many years we've looked away from the river, and I think it's overdue that we start looking towards the river, and certainly the people have spoken, they want us to do that. I think the money being spent here is reasonable funds to enable the program or the project to be ready to dig at the right times and get stuff out of the ground. So the staff are commended on the application, and certainly the 3 or 4 elements, the 4 elements in this project are viable and good elements for riverside activation. And I believe regionally we need to work with other towns and on the river to participate in this proposition and make it a value proposition. So well done to the staff, and I commend the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Mack. There's no one wishing to speak against, and there's no indication of any questions. Councillor Conn, you've indicated you wish to speak for. Would you like to speak for? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Given the answer I've just received from Ms Squire, I am happy to vote for this motion tonight. There's obviously feedback from the community that they would like us to continue to develop the riverside area to be more accessible to the community. It's certainly a huge asset for Albury. And there was excellent feedback from the community in terms of how we can improve this plan, particularly increasing the amount of shade, potentially from some extra planting, and potentially decreasing the parking right on the riverbank. I agree with a lot of the submissions that other than disabled parks, there's no real need for large amount of parking right up to the riverbank. And I sincerely hope that those submissions will be taken on board as we go through to the detailed plans.
Thank you, Councillor Conn. There's still no speakers against or any further questions. Councillor Mack, are you happy that we take this motion now? Thank you very much. I'll put this recommendation as a motion to the committee, A, B and C. All those in favour? Anyone against? That motion is carried. Thank you. Councillors, we're now moving to reports for noting of which there are none. Delegates' reports for noting of which there are none. Urgent matters of business, I'm not aware of any. I have been at work all day. Please indicate now if there are any. There are none. And confidential matters, there are none. I now close the meeting at 6:31 p.m. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Do I have to read this damn thing?
Yep.
Okay.
Without the expletives, thanks.
Sorry?
Without the expletives.
Okay.
Committee meetings.
Committee meetings, right. I haven't got a big enough hanky. As Maria said. Okay. It's not a big enough tissue.
It's the whole box there.
There's a whole box, thanks. I've only got hay fever. Thank you. Welcome to the Engineering and Works Committee meeting on Monday, 21st of August. I'll read out, first of all, that this committee meeting is being webcast and recorded. By speaking at the committee meeting, you agree to being recorded and webcast. Please ensure that if and when you are speaking at this committee meeting that you are respectful to other people and use appropriate language. AlburyCity accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures made during the course of this committee meeting. An audio recording will be made for administrative purposes. Thank you. Any conflict of interest declarations received? Thank you. None received. Apologies. I think all committee members are present, so no apologies required. Confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting, please. Councillor Thurley.
Chair, I move the committee recommends to Council that the minutes of the Engineering and Works Committee meeting held on Monday the 10th of July at 6:25 be adopted.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr Chair.
Thank you. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. Any matters arising from those minutes? If there's none, we'll move on. Reports and minutes of committees, committee meetings and working parties, EW6C 6.1, minutes of the local traffic committee meeting. Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Happy to move that the committee recommends to Council the minutes and recommendations of the following committees, if I may.
Yep.
Be received, noted and accepted. A, minutes of the local traffic committee meeting held on Thursday, 27 July 2017, and B, minutes of the Hume Zone Bush Fire Management Committee meeting held on 19 June 2017.
Thank you. Councillor Mack.
Happy to second that recommendation, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey, I've got a question from Councillor Stutchbury and Councillor Mack. So go to those questions first. Councillor Stutchbury.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a question to the relevant member of staff or councillor in regards to the local traffic committee meeting. I note that there was a very brief note on the red light camera, and I didn't really get a feel for where we're headed with that. So could I have some more information, please?
Mr. Ferris.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So, as councillors may be aware, RMS have got full control of the traffic signals throughout the state. They highlighted that they were considering putting a red light on the Mate Street, Fallon Street intersection. At this meeting in general business, they indicated that from a regional perspective, they don't see it as a priority, and therefore have notified the Office of Road Safety as such. So they're not going to progress the installation of that red light camera at this stage.
Okay. Okay. Do you want to follow up?
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, I just don't really understand. They proposed a red light camera and now they're stating that it's not required. So what thought processes were going through this sort of decision-making process? Were they flying a kite or were they actually putting some intellectual capacity into it?
Okay. Not sure whether you can answer that one, but anyway, I'll hand over to Mr. Ferris.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Certainly at the first meeting, it was just highlighted as a potential project that they asked for the opinion of the local traffic committee, which that was the first we'd heard, and we requested some further information if they were going to progress it. We didn't have any feedback with regard to that request, and then, as I say, at the meeting, they indicated that regionally that they won't pursue it any further.
Okay. Councillor Mack.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Chair, just in relation to the action item, Albury Transport Model, is that the transport consultation that's been done currently in partnership with RMS, or is this a separate one?
Mr. Ferris.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the Mayor is correct. That is the project that we're undertaking in partnership with RMS, and they're the lead agency. That project has stalled slightly, and we're trying to rectify some of the issues identified in the draft. We received a draft a number of months ago. We've reviewed that and provided some feedback to RMS, and hoping in the next week or so to meet with RMS and the consultants again to improve some of those findings.
Okay, Councillor Mack. Now, I've got a couple of questions from the Chair, if I can. I noticed that there's been no discussion recently through the local traffic committee, and I'm sorry I didn't have a chance to speak to the Chair of this before tonight, around the appropriateness of the traffic signal intervals, if you like, or delays, and I just think that there's a lot of them in Albury now that are just not appropriate because of the changed traffic circumstances. And I'm just wondering if, I know that we did some traffic counts at various intersections, but has there been any more work done with a view to approaching RMS to change some of these traffic signal cycles? Mr. Ferris.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Every 2 years we do a full review of the top 20 intersections throughout the city, and a lot of them have signals installed at those, and the delay times and the efficiency of those intersections is adjusted where needs to be. Certainly, if there's any particular intersections that need a review between those, we're more than happy to do an internal review and then forward it to Transport New South Wales for consideration to improve it.
So if I can just follow up, there's been none identified that need a change of timings or cycles?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there were some minor changes made from memory. The last full review was early 2016, so we're due for another one just after Christmas. But and there was only some minor changes there, but yeah, I'm not aware of any sequence changes from them, albeit Transport New South Wales monitor it through their Sydney headquarters, and they would make changes to it without corresponding with us. That's certainly well within their responsibilities to make changes, in particular those freeway interchanges where they have cameras and they're monitored a lot closer.
Yeah, I noticed though, again following up, I noticed though that on a lot of intersections now there's a lineup of traffic, and where there never was before. Like, and in some intersections, by the time the lights change, if somebody's not, on the ball, you can get two cars through a traffic sequence. Let's say at the corner of Kiwa and Smollett, and to me that's just ridiculous. And that's I'm just suggesting that perhaps at night time we could default to a traffic signal that stays in one direction until it signals from the other side and then leave it there until, because you've got about a 50% chance of getting it on either direction. And it just seems silly to me that you can go down Smollett Street heading west and you'll trigger the signals, and then as soon as you've gone through, it'll go back to the other way, even though there's no traffic there. And they're the sorts of things that I'm talking about. I know that at Smollett and Young, there's always a lineup of traffic to turn left now, and there used not to be, because that left turn on red's been taken away. Traffic in Wilson Street and Young Street, there's sometimes a lineup back past Hossacks to turn left into Young Street, especially towards the evening peak. And these are the sorts of things. So is it possible at some stage to have a have your say section about traffic intersections and problems? You're still on,
yeah,
Mr.
through,
Ferris?
Mr. Chair, and certainly take on board some of those comments made. Some of those issues are around faults in their system and faults in the infrastructure on site. But once identified, they rectify those. We certainly, as part of our integrated transport strategy, we intend to do a broad range of consultation there, and issues such as those frustrations at some of those intersections, I'm sure will be
Teased out.
During that process.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury, you have another question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the most relevant member of staff. This is an issue that I've discussed previously, certainly by email, possibly not in the chamber, but it relates to the southbound off-ramp of the freeway at the Riverina Highway. This morning, the right turn lane was full down to the freeway, and I did what I normally do. Even though I wanted to turn right, I went into the left lane and turned left. When the lights went green, 5 cars got through, turning right. And I had another look at the intersection when I was driving over the North Street Bridge, and there were more cars moving into that off-ramp, and those cars were adjacent to the left lane on the freeway. This is not a matter of frustration, this is a matter of safety. And I've asked you before if you could deal with RMS on this issue. It is only going to take a tin of paint and 2 signs. It's not any hard engineering, but they seem reluctant to address it. Have you made any progress in your dealings with RMS on this particular off-ramp?
Mr. Chair, certainly we've highlighted that intersection and the obvious improvement that could be made, as suggested, Councillor Stutchbury. We're currently working with them around the model and that particular intersection. We're not comfortable with the initial findings for the efficiency of that intersection, and we're asking for some further information and further investigation of that. But yeah, to answer your question, no, I don't believe that they've progressed our request to have 2 right turn lanes there as suggested.
Follow up.
That's very disappointing, Mr. Ferris.
Councillor Doxley, after that numerous questions, do you wish to open debate? Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think your hair is long enough to be called Madam Chair.
Oh,
Thank you very much for the comments that we've received around the table, and I make this open invitation as the Chair of the Local Traffic Committee that if councillors want to attend the meeting as a visitor or an observer, please do so. I'm sure Mr. Ferris would concur with that. And we can see where things are at. It's not a perfect world. We, as Mr. Ferris said, do not control traffic signals or the speed limits across New South Wales. We are at the beck and call. Sure, some councillors today expressed their frustration, and I accept that. Let's wait a little bit longer and have a look and see what this the traffic model is going to do for us and see where we're at. It's disappointing that no one has moved on to the Hume Zone Bushfire Management Committee and asked a question. I guess it's because of the amount of rain we've had, I suggest, Mr. Chairman. So therefore, I now close the debate. Thank you.
thank you. Okay, if there's no further comments or questions, I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. Item EWC 7, Officers' Report for Consideration, EWC 7.1, Draft Revised Trade Waste Policy. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the committee recommends to the council that Council A receive and note the draft revised trade waste policy, B place the draft revised trade waste policy on public exhibition, and C, in the event that no submissions are received, that the draft revised trade waste policy be adopted.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm very happy to second that.
Okay. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to open debate?
Very little to be said, Mr. Chair. It was a very minor, number of minor amendments were made to the policy, and mostly they refer to relevant government departments which have changed their name, so I don't think much more needs to be said.
Thank you. There's no more questions or anybody wishing to speak. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. EWC 8, Officers' Reports for Noting, EWC 8.1, the 2016-17 Works Program June Quarter Final Report. Councillor Mack.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I recommend that the committee recommends to council that the report on the final status of 2016-17 Works Program be received and noted. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
I second that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Mack, do you wish to open debate?
Just briefly, Mr. Chair, given that it's a credible result at 96.9% of completion and an value out of, I think there were 28 other projects added to the schedule, and I think engineering staff are to be congratulated. They continue to perform admirably given the weather conditions we've had and the difficulties outside at this time of year.
Thank you. I concur with those remarks. Any further questions or comments? If not, I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. I don't have any more items. I haven't received any notice of urgent business, so with that, I'll declare the meeting closed at 6:48 p.m. Thank you.
Sure.
Sure. We're having a 5-minute break, so great.
Okay. When you get age,
Sorry?
when you get older.
Turning to an operational matter.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to right the ship. Listing to port. Looked at me with stupid grin.
Forget you're streaming.
I'd like to open the Community and Cultural Committee meeting at 6:51 p.m. Firstly, have to read this announcement again. Apologies. This committee meeting is being webcast and recorded. By speaking at the committee meeting, you agree to being recorded and webcast. Please ensure that if and when you're speaking at this committee meeting that you're respectful to other people and use appropriate language. AlburyCity accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures made during the course of this committee meeting. An audio recording will be made for administrative purposes. Conflict of interest declarations, I have received one. It's from James Jenkins. It's non-pecuniary significant relating to the community and cultural grants, item 7.2, the description, Albury Conservation Company is an applicant in the grants and he is the public officer of the Conservation Company. His action is that he will leave the chamber. No further conflict of interest declarations. Apologies, I believe we have none this evening. We'll move on to confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the committee recommends to Council that the minutes of the Community and Cultural Committee meeting held on Monday, 17th of July at 6 p.m. be adopted.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderven.
Oh, sorry, Madam Chair. Happy to second that. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, would you like to speak to those minutes? Thank you. There's no speakers. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Matters arising from the minutes, we have none. Reports of committees and working parties, we have none. Officers' reports for consideration. 7.1, tender for replacement basketball backboards and supporting structures. Councillor Mack.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the committee recommends to Council the Council accepts the tender from RMA Sports and Leisure Proprietary Limited for contract number FIL 17/00475, replacement basketball backboards and supporting structures in the lump sum amount of $142,000, 037.50, including GST. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderven.
Again, happy to second that, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Mack, would you like to... Oh, sorry, I've got a question. Are you happy for me to take a question? Councillor Stutchbury.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the most relevant member of staff. I couldn't quite understand from the documents given to me why one of the two tenderers was non-compliant. I was wondering if that could be explained, please.
Thank you, Councillor Stutchbury. Mr Jenkins.
Through you, Madam Chair. In relation to basketball ringleader, they supplied a price only and didn't supply any supporting documentation, so it was impossible to make an assessment of the qualitative side of the equation. So, and as part of the tender process, they were requested to supply all that information.
Thank you, Mr Jenkins. Any follow-up questions, Councillor Stutchbury? No. Thank you. Councillor Mack, would you like to open debate on that item?
Just briefly, Madam Chair, I'd just like to say that the replacement of the backboards and certainly the supporting structures were part of the review that was done at Lauren Jackson Stadium that we looked at the report recently, and it was mentioned it was one of the items that was identified. The boards existing haven't been replaced on the 4 other courts since the centre opened, and they've become a safety issue, and I'm glad to see that the contract that has been completed is well under the amount that was budgeted. And I encourage us to continue to support Lauren Jackson Stadium because I think it is a great facility for the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mack. There are no further speakers for or against. I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Item 7.2, Community and Cultural Grants 2718. Councillor Thurley.
I'm just waiting for the thing to come up on the board. The recommendation.
All right, Tracy, you've got it.
Sorry, let the minutes reflect that James Jenkins has left the chamber at 6:55.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the committee recommends to Council that Council endorse the following community and cultural grants, and those that are listed in the table, I won't read them all.
Councillor Thurley, if you could please read the funding recommendations for those watching the webcast.
Okay. The following grants Boys to the Bush $3,000, the Other Theatre Company $3,000, Albury Wodonga Ethnic Communities Council $2,000, Albury Wodonga Lego Users Group $1,500, Albury Wodonga Volunteer Resource Bureau Longing to Belong $3,000, Filipino Association Albury Wodonga $2,000, Albury Public School P&C $2,250, Bruce Pennay $2,750, Linda Charlton $2,200, Dirk Spenneman $3,480. That I think total is 25,000 if Mr. Finlayson can move his head. Thank you. Committed funding of 25,180 out of the total pool of 37,000, leaving $11,820 of uncommitted funds.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. I've got a seconder, Councillor Stutchbury.
Thank you. I would like to second that.
I won't make you read it out. I've got a question, if you don't mind, Councillor Thurley. Councillor Vandervan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a few questions regarding some of these and a few comments as well. I'm a little surprised that the committee has made some recommendations around that the issue, like for one of them, not recommended for funding, and it was that the panel considered that the Thurgoona Men's Shed has already received a substantial amount of AlburyCity funding. Now, from my perspective, there are clear guidelines around the granting or non-granting of these funds, and I wouldn't have thought that because the Thurgoona Men's Shed has already received some funding for a large project, that should rule them out from receiving any funding for this particular project, which I believe you were very supportive of, with Councillor Conn being very supportive of, as far as the cats 24-hour cat containment regulations. So I'm just wanting to try and get an explanation of why we're able to knock out recommendations that on the surface clearly meet the criteria, but are knocked out for other considerations. So can I get some?
Thank you for the question. I'll put that through to the General Manager.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Councillor Vandervan. As indicated on page 12 in the report, funding will not be available for the following, and it lists a range of criteria there, a couple of which include projects that are or have the potential to be significantly funded from other sources, i.e. fees or sponsorship, recurring project, duplication of services and the like. So essentially, projects that have already been funded by AlburyCity, whether cash or in kind, is the excluding factor in that instance.
Thank you, Mr. Zagnich. Follow-up question.
I've got a few more questions too, Madam Chair. I don't see how that's relevant in this particular situation where they're clearly looking for funding for this particular project, which is the Keeping Kitty Safe project, whereas the funding that we've provided to them is for infrastructure for their building and their shed. So I'm not sure how that disqualifies them, even given your detailed explanation. So I want to refer back to the General Manager on that through you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for the follow-up question. Mr. Zagnich.
Not having been at the committee meeting, but have read the report in detail, my understanding is that it doesn't meet that criteria, which is why the committee's recommended that it not be funded in this instance.
Well, in future, Madam Chair, could we have the recommendation that it meets the criteria or it doesn't meet the criteria and not have just the assessment there that they're not funding it because they feel that the applicant's already receiving significant in-kind support from AlburyCity. So if that could be passed on to the committee, that would be appreciated. I want to talk about another one, that is the The one to the Filipino Association, Albury-Wodonga, having attended one of these PASCOM Filipino events in Wodonga a couple of years ago. This is an annual event, and they'll probably put their hand up to get it every year. I think Councillor King went to the last one, and I honestly don't think that this is one that should have been funded, even if it meets the meets the criteria, because it's just an annual event for them to have a get together and to celebrate the Filipino community in Albury-Wodonga. So.
Do you have a question, Councillor?
Yeah, I just wonder why it's been funded. I can't see how it meets any criteria.
I'm happy to take that question myself as a member of the panel for the Community and Cultural Grants. This is the first time the Filipino Association of Albury-Wodonga has approached AlburyCity for funding for this event. So whether it's a recurring event or not, this is the first time they've applied to this particular grants program. It will make them ineligible for future grants under the same program. So this funding is only available for this year's event.
Thank you. The other really serious issue, Madam Chair, is around the fact that at least 6 or 7 of these funding applications were around mental health. And I think that for me, puts up some really significant warning signs around that is a particularly serious and topical issue in our community. So I'm just asking if the council staff can perhaps take on notice the fact that there were significant requests for funding around mental health programs, and if we can look at that as a separate issue in council's priorities into the future. So that's my question, if council can take on notice that council staff and perhaps look at some way of having some community programs, awareness programs, workshops around the mental health issue, because it really is a significant number of those applications were around mental health and mental health programs and awareness. So that's my request.
I'll put that
Thank you, Madam
request
Chair.
through to Mr. Zagnich.
Thanks, Councillor Van through you, Madam Chair. Yes, certainly we can do, but again, it will be in partnership with the many other organisations that are directly funded to undertake those types of activities. So again, a partnership approach as has been indicated with these recommended grants this evening.
Thank you. I have another question from Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to get some clarification if I could, and if Mr Jenkins had been here, he may be able to give me the background to it. However, I'll proceed. When the question was asked about has the Filipino Association asked for grant funding in the past, your answer was no. This is their first time, but I looked around the chamber and I saw other people thinking this may not have been the case. So I'm just not sure where we're at with this one. Could I seek some further clarification, please? Thank you.
Sure. I'll put that through to Mr. Zagnich.
Thanks, Councillor Con. The situation is that this group did apply. Sorry, this group missed the deadline for last year's applications, as I understand it, and were encouraged to apply through other potential areas, including the mayoral discretionary fund. So, in terms of applications to this fund, that's correct. The group have not made a application through the Community Cultural Grants Fund, as I understand it.
I have no further. I have a further question.
Sorry, Madam Chair.
Councillor Vanderman.
Just the other one. Again, there's one there on page 4 of the projects, and that was around the Aspect Riverina School. And again, the notation is not recommended for funding, and the assessment panel feel that with funding and assistance now available through the NDIS, this would be a better funding source. So I'd like to know, A, whether the request met the criteria, and if it did, I would like to move an amendment that this be added to the projects for funding.
I can't answer that. Does it meet or not meet the criteria? I know why we didn't fund it. Mr. Zachnich.
Yep. Thanks, Councillor van der Ven. Through you, Madam Chair. Again, not being participant in the meeting, but just based on the criteria that's before us, again, contribution towards operating costs for the organisation is already receiving funding from federal or state government or other funding sources. So again, a group or a body that can be funded or is potentially being funded from another government source, funding's not available under the community and cultural grants as a matter of the funding guidelines and the council's policy. So that would be the primary reason for it not being funded, that availability of alternative funding, particularly from other levels of government.
Thank you, Mr. Zachnich. Follow-up question?
Well, not a follow-up, just a follow-up comment again, as per the previous one, is it possible and to have in the documentation that the funding application met the criteria, and then the recommendation from the panel was not to fund it because of that reason. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I believe the staff have noted that request
Thank
for
you.
wording in future reports. All right. I have no further questions. Councillor Thurley, would you like to open debate on this item?
At last, Madam Chair. I've served on this committee myself, and you'll note from the number of applications that a lot of community organisations apply. They don't all strictly look at the guidelines and see if they meet the particular guidelines. They toss their hat in the ring and they're looking to get some money. This committee works very hard and looks at all of the applications to try and best spend the money. And while we can sit in here disagreeing with this and that, in the end, we've allocated money to a very wide range of community groups and interests, covering a very wide range of activities. And as in the past, there will be some people who disagree, but this, to me, in the first round of funding, there's still 11,000 left to allocate, so people can apply again. And if they meet the criteria and it's seen as worthwhile by the members of this committee, they will be awarded a grant. But I commend this group of people, organisations that have been given the grant, and recommend to councillors that you vote in favour of this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. I have no speakers against, so I'll move to the next speaker for Councillor Mack.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a brief commentary about the Community and Cultural Fund, and I note that Councillor van der Ven did make mention of or was it Councillor Doxey mentioned the mental health imperative in these applications, and I do note with some cynicism that the reason for that would be yet another opportunity to cost shift to local government, and I just wonder, a lot of the not-for-profits are coming towards these types of funding opportunities to fund areas of the community that should be funded by state government or federal government, and I think it's disappointing, and I think the committee in this case have done a wonderful job to work out what ideally is something we should fund versus what could be funded by other sources of money. So I commend the report, and I commend the opportunity to give these organisations an opportunity to make good with the money they get. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mack. I have no further speakers for or against. If I can make my own brief comments as a member of the panel, it is an incredibly difficult process to go through whether to fund these applications or not. And this year we've done the Community and Cultural Grants program earlier in the year than we have done in previous years. And I understand that there were a number of groups that narrowly missed the deadline. So we made the really difficult decision to leave about $10,000 left in that fund so that we could have a second round of applications. And I know a number of groups already working on those applications. So I look forward to coming back to you with a second round of grants as well. I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. All right. Just letting Mr. Jenkins back into the chamber. Officers' reports for noting, I have none. Delegates' reports for noting, I have none. Any notice of urgent business, councillors? No notice of urgent business. There are no confidential matters tonight, so I'll close the Community and Cultural Committee meeting at 11 minutes past 7. Oops. Sorry, I shouldn't do it halfway through the meeting.
Thank you.
Righto, here we go. Thank you. I'll now declare open the Finance and Administration Committee meeting. And for all those who've been in the meeting, you'll have to hear the blurb for a fourth time. This council meeting is being webcast and recorded. By speaking at the council meeting, you agree to being... this committee meeting is being webcast and recorded. By speaking at the committee meeting, you agree to being recorded and webcast. Please ensure that if and when you are speaking at this committee meeting, you are respectful to other people and use appropriate language. AlburyCity accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures made during the course of this committee meeting. An audio recording will be made for administrative purposes. Thank you. Conflict of interest declarations, none received. There are no apologies of committee members. Confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting. Councillor Mack.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I'm happy to move the committee recommends to Council that the minutes of the Finance and Administration Committee meeting held on Monday the 17th of July 2017 at 6:20 p.m. be adopted. Thanks.
And Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Stutchbury. You wish to speak to the motion, Councillor Mack? I'll put the motion. All in favour? Against, the motion is carried. I have no indication of matters arising from minutes. There are no reports of and minutes of committees and working parties. FAC 7.1, investment balances, July 2017. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Through you to move the recommendation as a motion that the committee recommends to Council that Council receive and note the investment balances report for the month of July 2017.
Thank you. And Councillor Conn.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Happy to second that.
I have a question from Councillor Vandervan.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Through you to the appropriate member of staff. I noticed that in the next 4 months or so, there's in the vicinity of $46,390,260 rolling over in expired investments. I was just wondering if there's any significant plan to try and use the bulk of those funds to try and get a higher investment return from any of those our allowable investments.
Mr Finlayson.
Through you, Mr Chair, the intention was to follow AlburyCity's previous practice of seeking quotations for term deposits of up to or greater than 12 months to achieve the highest rate of return possible within the context of AlburyCity's policy.
Through you, Mr Chair, is there any indication from Treasury about what their rate might be if we invested significant funds with them?
Through you, Mr Chair, there is the option of investing with the Treasury Corporation, which forms part of the New South Wales government. They don't offer term deposit products as such, but they do have managed funds that are available for councils to invest with. Our current practice is to invest short-term funds with their cash trust as a type of at-call arrangement for short-term funding requirements. They do have longer-term type growth funds that council could consider as part of a longer-term investment strategy.
Councillor King, you have a question?
Yes, through you, Mr Chair, to the relevant member of staff. Are we at our capacity with supporting local institutions like Hume Bank and WAW?
Mr Finlayson.
Through you, Mr Chair, the category which those institutions fall into, we currently have more invested in that category than the policy allows for. That's primarily due to the change in ratings of the Bendigo Bank, which has put the Bendigo Bank in the same classification and moved some funds that we had in a higher classification. So currently we have the maximum that we can invest with those institutions.
I have no other questions. So, Councillor Glacken, do you wish to speak to the motion? In that case, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Against? The motion is carried. FAC 7.2, the Corporate Risk Plan 2017-18. I'm looking for a mover. Councillor Vandervan.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I move that the committee recommends the council endorse the attached corporate risk plan for 2017-18.
Thank you. And Councillor Mack.
Happy to second it, Mr Chair.
I don't have any questions. Councillor Vandervan, do you wish to speak the motion? In that case, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. FAC 7.3, the Audit Risk and Improvement Committee Charter. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Through you, to move the recommendation as a motion that the committee recommends to council that council adopt the revised Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee Charter.
Thank you. And Councillor Stutchbury.
I'd like to second that, please, Mr Chair.
Thank you. I have no questions. Councillor Glacken, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Mr Chair, just for clarification and perhaps a little bit of background information for councillors. Council has had for many years now an audit committee. There have been some changes brought in by the New South Wales State Government that require us to update the committee that we have been running to date. It's broadened the role slightly. Council's role the audit committee role for Albury City Council has always been broader than the previous requirements. The new requirements from the state government have become even more broad, and so that's why we're revising the program for what was the audit committee into what will be the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee Charter. Thank you, Mr Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Move on to Officers' Reports, FAC 8.1, Councillor Conference Attendance, 1st of January to 30th of June 2017. Councillor Vandervan.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I move that the committee recommends the council receive and note the report on councillor attendance at conference for the period 1 January 2017 to 30 June 2017.
Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr Chair.
You wish to speak to the motion, Councillor Vandervan? In that case, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. FAC 8.2, Delivery Program 6 Monthly Progress Report. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Mr Chair. To move the recommendation as a motion that the committee recommends to council that council receive and note the Delivery Program 6 Monthly Progress Report, June 2017.
Thank you. And the perennial seconder, Councillor Stutchbury.
I'm just not quick enough, Mr Chair. I would like to second that.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions, so I'll, Councillor Glacken, do you wish to speak to the motion? That's fine, thank you. I'll put the motion. All in favour? Against? The motion is carried. FAC 8.3, the 6 monthly update service and efficiency review program. And Councillor Mack.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I recommend that the committee recommends to council that council receive and note the 6-month August 2017 update of the Service and Efficiency Review Program. Thanks.
Thank you. And Councillor Vandervan.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Happy to second that motion or recommendation.
I don't have any questions or comments. So Councillor Vandervan has a question.
Just a quick one, Mr Chair. On page 2/15 of the Service and Efficiency Review document, the last or the second last bullet point where it says 2 additional solar sites have been installed at Lauren Jackson, 22 kilowatts, and admin building 51 kilowatts. Output will be included in the 2016-17 monitoring and estimated to save 33,600, and I'm suggesting that should have been 33,600 kilowatt hours. not dollars.
Mr. Zacknich said he'll note the matter and investigate.
Thank you.
There are no other questions or comments, so do you wish to speak, Councillor Mack?
Just to say that the service and efficiency reviews have been going since 2012-13, and it's a very healthy result financially for council, a saving of up to $2.84 million over that journey, with a view of saving 3.1 by the end of next financial year. I think it's not just about saving money, it's about becoming more efficient at what we do, and certainly there's a lot of challenges in this business to handle that efficiency given the issues with planning and engineering and all the diverse nature of business we do. But I would like to congratulate the General Manager and the staff because they are on track for a good result, and every day we're looking at ways of improving our business. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mack. I've no other questions or comments. I'll put the motion. All in favour? Against? The motion is carried. There are no delegates' reports, no notice of urgent business, and no confidential matters, so I declare the meeting closed at 7:22, and thank you for your attendance.